Hey y'all, welcome back to part 4 of the social media and mental health series. I'm super excited that y'all have taken the opportunity to listen to part 1, 2, and 3. Now we are in part 4. We're going to talk about how you can use social media and use it with wisdom. So I'm going to be going in detail on how to use social media in a very wise way that also helps you to just navigate again through all the things that we've talked about thus far. I am so happy that next week I will be able to talk to y'all live again, give you some reflections on what it's like to now be a mom of 2. So I look forward to seeing you all next week and talking with you, and I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful week. Now let's get into the show.
The Therapy is a Christian podcast is all things mental health and Christ. We specifically talk about how mental health and God are merged together to foster growth, healing, and making mental health a normal conversation. I'm your host, Rosin Renee, and welcome to the show.
Hello and welcome. You are listening to the Therapy as a Christian podcast. I'm your host, Rosin Renee, and welcome to another episode of the show. Hey girl, so I know y'all didn't see me last week, sis, because your girl was, I don't even know the word to describe what was happening, but I'll just give y'all a quick synopsis of this. So I passed my LCSW exam last Monday, and I posted about this on Instagram on Tuesday, which was November 1st, and posted about it on November 2nd. But I'm going to give y'all a little quick testimony before we get into this week's episode of the show. But I've talked about this before as a trial that has been literally ongoing for so long for me on passing this exam. So I know that y'all that listen to me, maybe you're new, maybe you're not new, maybe you're an OG listener, but my background professionally is in mental health, and I've been in the mental health field now for probably about since 2012, so almost 10 years of time. Postgraduate, meaning I got my master's degree and graduated from grad school in 2016. So postgrad, I've been working in the field since 2016. And so my background professionally is in mental health. So for those of you that don't know how the process works, when you get a master's degree, in what my degree is in, which is in social work, you are required to work a certain amount of hours to gain licensure to sit for an exam. So it's essentially kind of like it's what people call boards. And so to be fully licensed as a clinician, meaning I can open up a private practice. I can basically say I'm a licensed therapist. I am a clinical person that works in the mental health field, quote unquote. I had to sit for this exam, and y'all don't disobey the Lord. Was supposed to take me 2 years, took me 6. Now that's a whole long spiel of a story. In fact, if you go back to listen to my episode on how to I think it's all talking about trials. I don't know. I'll link it in the show notes. I talk about what it was like for me to want to leave my job back in 2019. And the Lord basically kind of told me that I needed to learn long suffering. And I didn't understand at the time when he told me that at the top of 2019. And I really wrestled with him all those years to get to this point. And on the other side of it, with victory now, looking back on it, I recognize what he was doing was just killing my flesh. If I could just give a spiritual context, he was killing my flesh. Practically, he was really teaching me a lesson on the value of being faithful to something, and also, Therapy as a Christian was birthed in that process. I was able to go into full-time entrepreneurship in this process. There was just so many layers of lessons. And so I just want to give encouragement to someone who is really struggling with seeing something through. I wanted to give up so many times. I wanted to just not do the work that I'm doing. I wanted to just say, this is just a bunch of BS, essentially. Like, I just don't want to do this anymore. And there were so many times God would lay the burden of you all on my heart, and the burden of like, I know this works so well that not seeing it through would be a disservice to, you know, myself, in the sense of like, I would always feel like, what if I didn't? What if I didn't? What if I didn't? Versus if I push through and do this and accomplish it, then the reward of it will be people's lives will be changed. But on the flip side of it, there were so many days, so many weeks, so many months, I just did not know what I was doing. I was just like, why is this even necessary? Like, what is the point of all of this? And so, you know, I just think that it's very important to see things through, which is on the other side of this. There's so much richness in this testimony that I just have to really just, you know, give honor to God about. But we're not talking about that this week. That's probably for another episode. We're going to talk today, lastly, about the last installment in the social media series, which I'm actually glad I took a break last week, because I've had some time to really think about all the stuff that I've talked to you all about over the last month about social media, and for myself, and, you know, just still the constant being tied to your phone. Like, I feel like that's just something you're going to really have to be intentional about working through. And so I wanted to talk to y'all this week about some practical things that God has been kind of revealing to me about using social media. But I also want to give you some spiritual context, because I think that I wouldn't be giving you enough to just practically how to use these things for, you know, in wisdom, use these tools in wisdom. But I also think that, especially for people who have businesses, or you're working to grow a business, or there are things that you're doing, there are oftentimes God will actually tell you to use these platforms, and you get frustrated with, you know, doing it. Like, lately he's been putting on my heart to go back on live video. YouTube has been dropped in my spirit a couple of times, and I've just been like resistant to add another thing to my plate. But I also recognize that there is use of using these things, in use of being on these platforms. And so in using them with wisdom, I think, like I've talked to y'all about insecurity, I've talked to you about the importance of taking a break, I've talked to you about really being mindful of how you're taking in and what you're listening to, and listening to learn versus listening to be critical. So I've talked to you ad nauseum about the emotional piece of this, more so than even just the practical use of it. But now I want to really deal with, if you're going to use these tools, I've been really delving into the word about Jesus transforming our hearts. And I'm going to talk to the woman who is really, might be struggling in her faith, might be struggling in just getting back to the basics of Christ, getting back to the basics of, and why is this even important with social media, which I'm going to explain in a second, but getting back to the basics of Christ, the basics of our faith, the foundation of our faith. This world is so off the chain, it's not even funny. And so I think that we have to be so secure in our faith. And I say this with a compassionate heart, because I do personally know at times where you are struggling in your faith, that hearing somebody talk about it can be almost like, you know, nails on a chalkboard. It's like screeching, because you're like, I'm trying. I'm like, I'm really trying, sis. Okay. I'm fighting in my faith. And I posted about this yesterday on social media, and I said, you know, I had a good cry with God, and I told him, I said, you know, I will never allow the circumstances of what I'm experiencing to make me think that I don't love you, or that you don't love me. And as hard as it is, sometimes I was talking to him about the fight of faith, and how the fight of faith is so hard at times, that I don't care if anybody who is, you know, they preach, they share, they're walking this walk. We are all fighting. We are fighting against our sinful nature. We are fighting against the negative thoughts we feel. And I was reading in the scripture in Romans 7. I don't remember the exact scriptures, but it was talking about when Paul was saying, what I want to do, I don't do. And what I will to do, it's like, I can't even do it. Like he was just saying, he's like, I'm struggling in myself because my sinful man is like really fighting against me. And so I think that there is such a desire for us to serve God wholeheartedly, serve God with a heart of transparency before him, doing things the right way, trying to even understand what doing things the right way is, because we have so many opinions and so many thoughts of do this way and do this that way and do this and it's just really going back to are you studying your word? Like, are you getting into the Bible? Are you reading? Are you studying? Are you listening to, I won't even say listen to, but really just reading? That cry that I have of God maybe was all of 30 minutes. I probably read about 20 verses, and I promise you, just a light bulb. And I think we complicate it so much to, God just wants a relationship with us. God just wants us to be in relationship with him. He wants us to be before him. He wants us to talk to him. But our sinful man doesn't want to do it because, one, we think it's going to take too long. We think God's not going to listen. We think nothing's going to happen. We think all these things. And sometimes that is true in the sense of like you go to God and you feel like sometimes you don't get anything, but it's about persistence. And the truth of the matter is we aren't dwelling on truth when we're not in the word. Like reading that verse made me realize when I was talking to God, it's just like, God, there's so many opinions and people who preach and people who, even myself, who share the message of God mean well in sharing. We're doing this to help. But what happens is when we feel, I would say just internally overwhelmed or internally insecure or just feeling all these feelings, we almost hear what people are saying to us in good character and in good help. And we take it and we get frustrated. We get mad. We almost become jealous of their walk with God because we're like, well, I'm not where that person is and I'm here. That we almost turn on ourselves. And that's what the enemy wants to do. And so he wants you to make you think that God doesn't love you and that you don't love him. And what I was telling God was that, I want to believe. I want to not be prideful in my mind at times. I want to so badly to not think negatively. I want so badly to not this, and this. And so when I read that verse of scripture in Romans 7, when Paul was talking about it, I realized that the only way to die fully to the flesh is to understand that my fleshly man died with Christ and that the finished work of the cross is finished and that the finished work of the cross was good enough. And I think we have to really continue to remind ourselves of what Jesus did and the weight of what that meant. And we hear the stories, we hear that, and you're like, Rosalind, why does this align with social media? Because I want you to understand that the foundation of your faith is faith in Christ, period. And if you understand the finished work of the cross, the power you have is so mighty that no situation, no mental health crisis, no whatever, overtakes the finished work of the cross. And so the transformation internally that happens when we allow Christ to change us internally is that we begin to see the error of these things that the enemy has used to pervert, to deceive us, to all of these things. Even me bringing this message to you in faith is of importance because it makes you understand that it's not about you trying to be perfect before God. And so when it goes to these things with social media, I think we use these as crutches to try to find our way through all the stuff to find God. And also on the other side of it, we use them as tools to growth and birth businesses and birth visions and use things to share and all these kinds of things. This is my own perspective, y'all, so don't, it's not law. So in saying all this, I think that it's important to understand that how to use these things practically when I'm talking about the emotional piece is understanding that first and foremost, your foundation is your faith. And going from that, whether you're using social media for business, where you're using social media for entertainment, if you're using social media as a way to distract yourself, if you're using social media as a way to not deal with the pain of something or whatever, it's a tool. It's a tool. It's a tool. If you use that tool for, whatever it's worth, then it can be helpful. But if you use it for an abusive situation of using it to get away from things, and this happens, y'all, I'm not trying to say like it don't happen, because it does. But we have to go back to the foundation of who we are as believers, understanding this, and it can shape the way we think about these things. So, and going into the practicality of this, I'm going to hit it from the emotional side first, and then I'm going to go back into the practical, meaning how to use these things in wisdom. So the first thing with emotional is, again, using it to deal with overwhelm. If you're finding that you're overwhelmed when you get on social media, if you find that you're super distracted, if you find that you are really having a hard time, first of all, if you're really distracted, let's go back. If you're an ambitious woman, and you are really someone who is trying to use these things for good, or use it for betterment of your business or whatever you're going to do, then understand that it's important to know when and how to use them. And so when you're overwhelmed, it's really hard for you to decipher anything because your brain is cloudy. And so I would highly recommend either one, taking a break, taking a step back, finding a way to just brain dump some things on a piece of paper. Like, what are you going to do to create content? What are you going to do to create these, use these things? But in general, if you're overwhelmed, figure out, what is the trigger for the overwhelm? What is the thing you're avoiding? What is the thing that you have going on? Is it you're really consumed about your future? Is it what is causing you to use this tool and avoid? What is the real root of the issue? What is the real trigger? What is the real emotional part that's causing you to go into this tool and use it for something that, you avoid? All of those types of things. And then going back to listening, if you're going on social media and you're using this as a tool, are you using it to listen, to learn, or is it becoming a thing where you're listening or looking to be self-critical? I know that my stories are entertaining, and I talk about a bunch of stuff. And so I think that, again, that's entertainment. But if it becomes to a thing where it becomes an insecurity for you, you have to know when to separate, step back. It's the same thing if you were, in a relationship with someone that was causing you harm. Being in a place, do you need to take a break? Do you need to take a step away? Like, those things are things to be mindful of when you're approaching these tools. And so going into the practical, if you're someone, again, who uses it for different reasons, maybe you need to schedule your content. Facebook is free. So there is an actual way that you can, if you have a specific business app, or if your Instagram is for business, or if you just have if you want to just schedule content out, you can schedule your content out via Facebook. You can do that through business.facebook.com. And you can schedule content out way in advance if you create it. So that way you're not posting or being on there all the time if you find that you need to do that. Maybe you need to take frequent breaks. So maybe you need to schedule breaks out. Maybe you need to, at the top of the month or the end of the month, take a detox. Maybe take 3 or 4 days just completely off the app. Sometimes I have friends that are so busy. They're like, girl, I don't even have time to look at my phone. And that's fine, because a lot of times some people aren't on their phone all the time. But I'm thinking about people who, that I know who may or may not use social media for reasons or purposes of content creation. You may need to take breaks. I know that's something I'm going to build into my schedule, is frequent breaks throughout the month where I'm not on the app. And that's okay. Maybe sometimes you just need to log out. So there's a way where you can actually log out of your Instagram or social media or Facebook or even TikTok and log out, to where if you go to the app, you actually have to manually log in order to do so. And so those things, I tell clients this all the time, especially when I'm talking to them about their distractions, because so many of them find that social media is a big distraction for them, and they use it as a means to avoid what they really need to do. And so in the beginning of a lot of my work with them, I tell them, get off. Like, just give your brain the permission and yourself the permission to take a break. When I hear clients say, I'm on my phone all the time, I'm like, have you taken a break? Have you given yourself the opportunity? Some of them never even taken a break before. Some of them have, and they find that they go back and forth, but that's fine. Like, sometimes you do have to go back and forth to kind of get the opportunity to just break. But also understanding that using these tools for good sometimes are purpose to give yourself the permission to take a break. Okay? Remove the app from your phone. So if you even go as far as needing to delete whatever social media platform you use, maybe you need to use it on the desktop. If you're someone that has to do with business, you can add stuff now on Facebook and Instagram via desktop. You don't have to have the app or the phone in order to get things done. And so this is super important when trying to know how to use these things of wisdom. Pull away from the actual thing that is causing the temptation, which is on your phone. Use it during a certain time of the day, maybe on your computer or whatever you need to do. And then last thing, going back and forth with working to remove the trigger. Again, I'm coming to y'all from more of a emotional standpoint of understanding these things. You have to understand that most of the time when you are distracted with something, most of the time, and this is what I've realized from a lot of clients, is that most of the time they're avoiding something. There's some emotional component to it, whether it's a belief they have about something, or just unprocessed emotions, or even feeling as though they can't, they don't feel like they're doing well with something. I know that that's something I have heard ad nauseum, where there's this beat up of self because you feel like I'm not where I need to be, or I'm behind, or I'm not doing a great job. And again, y'all, there are so many people that we look up to that are accomplishing things that we don't know, one, what it took for them to get there, and two, how long they've been working at something. Some people are actually in harvest of the seeds they planted for years. And so we become sometimes so entitled to, and this was another thing I was telling God the other day, I think we have to really check our heart posture of, are we wanting, and this is where I'm talking about people who are, pursuing things. Are we wanting platform, or are we really wanting to just do the work and put our head down? Because a lot of times the mundane every single day doing the work is not for the purpose of, you don't see the fruit of it. And so for other people who may just honestly, like, they love what they do, they love their jobs, they just use social media for entertainment and all of those necessities. They don't necessarily use it for business or any of those reasons. You have to really then at that point then know, what are you avoiding? If it becomes a distraction, what are you essentially avoiding? Are you avoiding work? Are you avoiding dealing with an emotional situation? Are you wanting to wish to be in a relationship, so then you just spend your time looking at other people's relationships, and it ends up causing you to be down on yourself because you're not in one? Those become emotional triggers. And so if it's an unfollowing spree, using sometimes these tools with wisdom is not following people that impart, or if you're not at the place where you can take it in strong enough to unfollow. There's nothing wrong with unfollowing somebody. Like, I just think we don't understand. Like, even if you mute people, there's some people I follow that I just mute, and I probably have forgotten that I've muted them. But just in saying that, to say, like, using stuff with wisdom is sometimes cutting it off right at the point. And there's nothing wrong with that. And so it's dealing with, what is the emotional piece behind this? What is the thing emotionally that I'm reacting to? Because a lot of times when we react emotionally, it is because, or even react in general, there's some level of emotion and thought behind it. I teach my girls on Show Up Sis all the time that your thoughts and the beliefs you have about yourself, or beliefs you have about anything, always impact your emotions, and they always impact your behavior. They inadvertently always impact what you do. And so if you believe something to be true about yourself, or you may unconsciously don't know that you're believing something about yourself to be true, your emotions and your behavior is going to fall same into that. If you're burnt out, you're going to react if you're burnt out, you're going to be irritable. You're going to be short-tempered. You're going to be super frustrated, super flustered, because there is a lack of energy. There's a lack of being full, and that comes from what is around me that's allowing me to be burnt out. And sometimes as a parent you may be burnt out, sometimes in jobs you may be burnt out, sometimes in all these situations. And so recognizing these things are super important because they impact your emotional state, which ultimately impacts how you react. And so going back to this, when using some of these tools with wisdom, it's understanding is what is the thing that's impacting me emotionally, that's causing me to avoid, that's causing me to react differently, or causing me to do something. Sometimes you just need a break. Sometimes if you're burnt out, you just need to refuel. And that's wisdom. Okay? So I hope this answered some of the questions that y'all have with, in social media in general. Go back and listen to the episode and the episodes on how you can really work to identify some of these factors and begin to work through them. So if you love this episode, make sure you share it with a friend. And I love y'all, and I'll talk to y'all next week. This episode of the Therapy is a Christian podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. If you think you might be feeling depressed, stressed, anxious, or overwhelmed, which I know we all have, BetterHelp is here to help. So I think about all the time when I first started therapy back in 2018, and if I had never taken the step, where my life would be at now, especially having had now become married, have a kid, gone through a pandemic, being pregnant in a pandemic. And I remember just in general, when I got engaged to my husband right before starting therapy, how overwhelmed I was. Just the thought of, I'm about to commit my life to this person and I don't even know how to cope with anxiety, and just feeling so overwhelmed all the time. And so I'm so thankful that I took the step to actually go to therapy, because I really believe I gained so many tools from having that experience. And now, still being in therapy now, 4.5 years later, I've learned so much throughout those different transitions, specifically just having a space for myself. So BetterHelp offers licensed therapists who are trained to listen and help you. When you talk to your therapist, you're able to talk to them in a private online environment at your convenience. There is a broad range of expertise in BetterHelp's 20,000 therapist network that gives you access to help that may not be in your area. You may be a college student and really needing an online experience. You may be a working mom who doesn't have the time to actually go drive to a therapist's office. Or you may be somebody that works from home and likes the convenience of being able to take a break during your day to meet with your therapist. All you need to do is just fill out a small questionnaire to be able to help assess your specific needs, and then you'll get matched with a therapist within 48 hours. Then you'll schedule a secure video and phone session, plus you'll be able to exchange unlimited messages. And that is so amazing because everything you share with them is completely confidential, which means they can't go out and share your business with other people. So the useful part about this, and I think what is amazing, is when we transitioned into the pandemic, I was able to actually meet my therapist online, and I did not realize how much of a convenience that was. And it was so helpful. So if you get matched with a therapist and you don't like them, or you don't feel like you are really able to open up to them, you can request a new therapist at no additional charge anytime. So y'all, join the 2 million plus people who have taken charge of their mental health with an experienced BetterHelp therapist. I have a special offer for you guys for the Therapy is a Christian podcast listeners, where you can get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/Roslyn Renee. That's better, BETTER, help, HELP.com/Roslyn Renee, ROSLYNRENE. Thanks again to BetterHelp for sponsoring this podcast. Now let's get back to the show.